As Mike said, I'm Tom. I'm the sales and marketing guy. Been involved in over 25 different startup ventures in my career. And my good friend Gino here. Say hi, Gino.
Hello.
He's the smart one of the two of us. He's the brains of the operation.
God help us all.
We first met back in the 70s in the streets of Edina, and are both very proud alums from the University of Minnesota. And our wives are really good friends, and we have a really fun life stage we're in right now in our 60s and moving forward. So where do we fit in the investment time frame? So if you think about a traditional startup venture, right, you've got various levels of funding represented by this chart here, right? And when you start out, you bootstrap, and then you get some money from your friends and families. You get a grant. In fact, we just got an email from a partner of ours a couple hours ago who just got a grant from a group in the state of Minnesota, which is very exciting. Then you move in the venture capital world and crowdfunding and so on and so forth. So where we fit in is we really fit in before the sort I call the professional money comes in. So look at us as your shepherd, if you will, your partner to help you go through this early stage of your journey and get ready for the professional money to come involved. Not that we're not professional, but we're not really registered investment organization in the traditional sense of the world. I've raised money a bunch of times in my life, so I can help you get ready if that's the road that you go down. So our model is pretty simple. We help people build prototypes. We an active investor in both of in terms of our talents and our skills and our money, and then we're a manufacturing incubator. You can see behind us here. This is Gino's business. You want to take a second, Gino, and tell them what you're looking at here?
So we deal with metals, primarily sheet, but we do a lot of tube as well. And we fabricate all kinds of devices for many, many industries across the country and across the world.
And how long has business been here, Gino?
The business is 43 years old. I've owned it for 32.
Okay. Started by your dad.
Yep.
So basically Minnetonka Labs is we sort of incubate inside of Gino's business. So even though it's just the two of us in a sort of this early stage idea investment, Gino's been kind enough to sort of open the doors and let us kind of incubate in here. So if you want to talk to Minnetonka Labs about doing business together, we usually have our partners come in here, and we use this as our launching point for our conversations.
Yep. For making prototypes and putting things together.
Yep. So who do we work with? We work with all sorts of people, but usually people like yourselves that have ideas, proof of concepts. It may be a simple cocktail napkin. It could be a detailed design. I got a call today. I got 3 phone calls today from 3 inventors in Minnesota that all want to explore our business model together. And one gentleman already has 6 patents, but he hasn't prototyped it yet. So he's very, very mature in his journey. Other people call me up and say, I got this great idea. What do I do? And everything in between. And we love to talk to all those people. My background is almost exclusively software. Gino's background is industrial commercial, as you can see behind us, hard goods. We're not in the software world. I've departed my 35 years of software, and now we're in the physical goods business, but we are industry agnostic. But think again, physical, B2B, hard tech, industrial. He does a lot of work in the fiber optics business, and logistics. We're going to talk about an example in the logistics space that we just are working on as we speak. And usually people we work with have either are working on or applied for, or in this gentleman's case, have been approved for a patent. So what do we provide in the relationship? We provide all sorts of things. Gino's got all sorts of great technology here, blueprints, 3D CADs, engineering documents. What happened to my mouse? There we go. Patent application assistance. If you've never done that process before, we can help guide you through and coach you through that process. Material selection.
Specifications.
Yep. We do what we call a 4-phase prototyping phase. So the first one is does it work? Second phase is can we break it?
And where does it break?
And where does it break? All right. Once we go through that process, then we make prototypes for field testing. And then lastly, to get to that pre-manufacturing stage. So think of us as sort of a 4-stage. It's not cut in stone. Obviously, every situation is different, but generally that's kind of the approach we take from a prototyping perspective. We get bid-ready manufacturing specs, and then we also provide go-to-market strategy development in concert with the inventor or the entrepreneur and help you validate the market. And this is a big one. A lot of inventors I talk to, they got great ideas, but they don't know how to go about validating if there's actually a viable business here.
Yeah. Is somebody going to give money to buy what they have?
Correct. What's our model? We have no charge for these services. That's part of our investment. We negotiate some success model on the back end, whether it's a revenue share or equity or some combination of both. We will put in cash if it's necessary and needed to.
Usually necessary during the prototyping phase.
Right. But we want to make sure our vision here and our mission here is most inventors, entrepreneurs are not wealthy individuals with huge bank accounts. A lot of people and yourself are, they bootstrap these things. We don't want to take cash out of the business at the early stages, right? We're dedicated to make this a win-win situation, and we'll make our money once you're successful. And that's how we are motivated to make sure we do the best job possible for our partners. So when you come to see us, and like I said, I'm getting calls every day now. These are what we're going to ask you. And so if you're going to call me up, call Gino, be prepared to answer these questions. What's the problem you're solving? Do you have proof that potential buyers actually care? And that's a really hard question. But it's one you got to ask yourself is, how do I prove that people are willing to part with their money for this invention or this idea I've got? Is the market ready? I created a company 3 years ago called Basin Commerce. We had this great vision of making an Expedia for river barge traffic on the waterways, the Mississippi River and so forth. And we asked the first two questions. We said, is there a problem? Yes. We're still booking barge freight on the phone and the fax machine. Do you really care? Yes, we really care. We said, yes, great. We spent 2 years hoping for money. Pardon me? Bunch of money doing it. But then 2 years into it, I found out that the market wasn't really ready. It was going to be ready in 5 more years. And so that ready question is important. How big's the market? What's the status of your patents? Are there other patents or works of art we need to worry about? What do the macroeconomics look like and how do they work? And lastly, how are you actually going to sell this? How are you going to monetize it and generate revenue? And that's the big question that I'm always going to ask multiple times over, as you might be able to tell.
Yeah, and I stick more to the patent side. Is that patent bulletproof? Can you work with it? Has it got you real protection? Because if you can't protect it, you're not going to get time to work out your problems and get it to market. Because if some big guy likes it, realizes that you've solved the problem, and the market cares, they'll just steal it.
Yep. And lastly, will you be making your livelihood by doing this? Is this just a part-time thing and you want to just license your idea or your patent, or you can actually try to make a living out of this? And that's also a very important question you need to ask yourself. So as an example, our first project we're shepherding through, and some of you have heard of this, this is actually a situation where we are our own customer, so to speak.
Yep.
We have invented something called the tilt brake hand truck. And this is for professional delivery people, like food service people that are moving heavy loads down a two-wheel hand truck down an incline or a ramp. And you stack up 500 pounds of frozen hamburger patties on one of those things, and it's really easy to lose control. We were watching somebody do that back in July. The guy crashed his cart, and a bunch of beer broke out in the parking lot. And there was somebody that said, "I know how to solve that problem." And we're at the stage of getting this thing, hopefully a prototype, built very soon. Inside of there's a braking mechanism that's actuated when you tilt the hand truck down. Brakes it actuated on the insides of the wheels and slow the rate of descent for the operator. We're going to target food service delivery market, the beverages, think beer and soda, and moving companies are the first 3 markets. And we started this back in August. We hope to have our first prototype done in March.
Well, we've actually been through 2 different prototypes.
Correct.
Actually 3 now, 3 different prototypes, and working on the 4th. And again, all geared toward destruction. Does it work? How does it perform? Will the market accept it? Where does it break if you happen to mishandle the product? Can you get someone hurt by using the product? Are there pinch points and things like that? How do you maintenance the product? So all of the things you think about, maybe as a consumer when you buy something, how do I take care of this thing? We're working through in this process.
Great. And then lastly, we have a provisional patent filed, which we filed back in August.
Yep.
So this is the first real product process. Somebody, please mute your phone, please. Somebody accidentally unmuted something, it sounds like. So that's a little bit about, Minnetonka Labs, what we do. We'd love to talk to any of you out there that have ideas and so forth. So now I want to kind of shift gears and talk about how you monetize ideas and the inventor versus the entrepreneur conversation I mentioned. So before we can answer the question is how do you monetize, you need to ask yourself, are you an inventor or are you an entrepreneur? And this is a very important question to ask yourself. So here's the definition of an inventor, okay? Someone who devises some new process, appliance, machine, or article, makes inventions, pretty straightforward. So what's an entrepreneur, right? It's a person who organizes and manages an enterprise, especially a business, usually with considerable initiative and risk, okay?
Two different people.
Very different people. We'll talk about the next slide, but I hear these words used interchangeably a lot when I have meetings like this and 1 million cups and people refer to them as entrepreneurs, but they're really inventors and vice versa. So I just want to get you thinking a little bit here. If you've got ideas and inventions you're working on, which of these two are you? Because it's going to really make a difference as to how you, if you want to work with us, how we're going to treat you based upon the answer to that big question.
In our short experience, it's rare to have both in one person.
Correct. So if you're an inventor, right, you've got basically, I see two options, right? You can license your patent or you can sell your patent. Both of them are reasonable ways to monetize your idea and your patent. But if you're purely an inventor, and there's a lot of you on this call that I've gotten to know well over the last 6 months, those are the best way to monetize your ideas. If you're an entrepreneur, there's kind of two different options you got in terms of our opinion. One is I can build a product, but not really build a brand or a business out of it, right? I can go into a private label manufacturing arrangement and build it and let somebody else sell it, right? You can do that. It's not as lucrative, but also not as risky. And the way to make the most money out of your idea and invention, if you are really truly an entrepreneur and have the right profile for that, is you can build a product and a brand and a company. It's not for everyone, and it is 10 times more work than you can possibly think it will be when you start the journey.
Yes, okay? It is.
And we'll talk more about that here in a little bit. So I like to ask the question and say, you don't know what you don't know, right? And I want to tell you a couple of quick stories. Back in the 80s, when I got into business, and Gino laughed when I brought this up, there used to be a management technique called MBWA, which stood for, in the old days, management by walking around. And that was the idea that too many managers and leaders sat in their cubicles, their offices all day, and didn't have a feel for their employees, or more importantly, their customers, okay? So the first thing I would say to this community is get the heck out of your garage, get out of your office, COVID set aside, and get out of what we used to call the ivory tower. I'll give you an example. I got a call about 3 weeks ago from a young man who's a brilliant data scientist. He used to work for a company called C.H. Robinson. You all know C.H. Robinson, great big logistics and 3PL company based here in Eden Prairie. And he was working inside of C.H. Robinson and decided to leave the company and start our own software business called Click Tower. And he calls me up because he's looking for money, right? I said, well, what's Click Tower? He goes, well, what Click Tower is if you picture a big distribution facility with all those receiving docks and all those doors numbered, 1 through 20. And they got the red lights, the green lights, and all the great stuff. Because right now they organize and they tell truckers where to go. You go to slot 3, they do it by hand and by the telephone. And I'm going to build a platform, a software platform that's going to automate that whole process. And I said, well, that sounds really cool. I said, how many people have you talked to that run those docks? Well, none. I said, have you ever been to one of these facilities? No. So there's a bright young data scientist who thinks he's got a great idea. He's never been in a distribution facility and never talked to a person that actually manages the traffic in and out of those loading docks.
But he's going to fix all their problems.
He's going to fix all their problems. And he's asking me for money. And I said, well, son, because he literally could be my son. I said, you go talk to 10 people whose job it is to manage those doors, and then you come back and call me, and we'll have a second conversation. And it's a great example of this concept of get the heck out, walk around, look at your customers, and talk to the marketplace. Secondly, know your customer thoroughly. My biggest weakness is my optimism. And as inventors and idea guys, which I am, we always think our idea is going to be loved by everybody. But the reality is it's not. And so be honest with yourself and know your customer and know your market very, very thoroughly before you spend a bunch of money and time working on a project. The next thing I would recommend is test. Okay? Product, positioning, and sales pitch. If you look at that book on the right-hand side, The Lean Startup, that's what that book is all about. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend you read it because it talks about how to do this thoroughly. Because until you triple test and quadruple test, you're not sure you're really going to be successful with your market. And the last thing, there's an old saying in this business that says, build a better mousetrap and the world will be a path to your door. I think Ralph Waldo Emerson gets credit for that. But the reality is that is completely false. That is completely false. The world is littered with great ideas, with great products that sat on the shelf because they were never sold or never marketed properly because the inventor thought, hey, and I worked for these guys. I worked for a lot of guys in Silicon Valley in the 90s and the 00s that thought they had the coolest piece of software in the world, didn't want to spend a nickel on sales and marketing, and we all failed as a result because we underfunded the sales and marketing effort because he thought this was going to sell itself. It doesn't sell itself.
Nothing does.
Nothing does. Okay, so let's pretend you want to build a business out of your invention and become an entrepreneur. So a guy named Gino Wickman, he's very famous author of something called the Enterprise Operating System, or EOS. He also has a book out called The Entrepreneurial Leap. And he's identified 6 traits of an entrepreneur. Number 1, you got to be a visionary. And I'm not talking about just, I got a vision on how this product works, but I got a vision on how the world will look at it and how the world will accept it and how the world will use it. So not the vision of the technology, but it's the vision of the usage of the technology or your invention. You got to be passionate. This is not a business for people that really are kind of vanilla-ish or neutral when they come to the passion meter. You got to be able to solve problems because in this, when you start companies, new problems start up
every single day, multiple times a day.
You got to be very driven to be successful, almost to a point. If you look at the really successful guys we can think of, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, those guys are all extremely driven people.
Well, even local successes.
Yeah, absolutely. Bill Ronnie, founder of Digital River. Please mute your phone, by the way.
I noticed a lot of young boys of color, particularly some other boys who are like dying, whether it's
Hey, Susan, can you mute your phone?
overdoses. So I was like, let me write a book.
Will do. Sorry.
Thank you. You have to be a risk taker because this is all about taking risks financially, emotionally, time-wise. And lastly, you got to be responsible. You don't get to blame anybody but yourself when things don't work. Right, Gino?
Yeah. Yep, it lands on your desk.
Right. So if you want to go down the road of I'm an entrepreneur, I suggest you read this book and really take an introspective look at yourself and really be honest with yourself as to, do you have these traits to be successful? Okay. So let's say you want to build a company. Okay. It's really exciting. It's a lot of fun. It's also a lot of work. This is just a list that I created off the top of my head the other day on all the stuff you got to build. Okay. You got to create a vision. You got to create a legal structure. You got to do financing and cap tables and a banking partner. And you got to worry about facilities and accounting systems and a board of directors, checkbooks and HR benefits and hiring and firing and trademarks and staffing and sourcing and marketing and sales and every one of these things.
Receiving process, shipping process, invoicing process, and get all those bills paid.
Right. All those are critical, but there's a lot of them, right? There's a lot of them, and we're trying to give you the message here that it's a wonderful journey to build a company out of an idea, but we want to be truthful with you and let you know that it is a lot of work. It is a lot of work. So now let's switch gears here and talk about sales. And I created this slide the other day. I was thinking about this and all the inventors that I've met and worked for in my life, and even the people I've met in the last 3 months as we started Minnetonka Labs. And it's remarkable to me as to when I have the question about selling, they really haven't thought about it that much. And I started asking myself, well, you can't sell it. Why are you inventing it? Why are you wasting your time and your energy inventing something that no one's going to buy if you can't sell it? So if you come to talk to us, Gino's going to talk to you all day long about patents and engineering and CAD, CAM, all that great stuff. But I'm going to be the guy in the room that's going to say, how the heck are you going to sell this thing and make any money on it? Because we can't figure that out. We're all wasting our we're wasting our time.
It has to do with price point and does it work and is it serviceable and does it last and all that kind of stuff.
Yep. So I want to walk you through something, and maybe some of you have seen this chart. It's called Crossing the Chasm, and it was first developed in the early 90s by a guy named Jeffrey Moore out of Silicon Valley. And he was I think he was a professor at Stanford, if I recall, and he's created basically the Bible for new product introductions in the technology industry, which is where I've been my last 30 years. But it applies, I think, to most industries and to most ideas. And the concept is that if you look at this chart, is that this sort of breaks up any given marketplace for a new product, right? It says, okay, you bring a new product to market on the left-hand side, and in any market, there's a small number of people called the innovators. And then this chart, it says it's 2.5% of your market. They'll buy anything. I'm the same guy. The day that new iPhone comes out, I want to have it, right? And they're all out there, and it's easy to go find those guys and sell it, and they'll be really enthusiastic, and they're going to give you all sorts of great false promise that this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, because that's the way they think about things. Then you have the next phase of the market called the visionaries, or the early adopters, okay? And they're a little more advanced. They're a little harder to get to, but they think out 10, 15 years and say, oh, you know what, this iPhone, man, I see where this thing's going to go. I want to get part of this thing early, right? And then you've got this gap called the chasm, okay? And this chasm is the hard part of the business. Because where you make all your money, if there was a revenue line on the same chart, right, the revenue line would get really big in the middle two sections, right, the early and the late majorities, which are basically, 70, 80% of your marketplace, okay? The challenge is getting across that chasm. And I call this Death Valley, okay, because this is where most companies go to die. Because they got market feedback from the first two sets of customers, the innovators and the early adopters, and they assume that that's what everybody else wants. But pragmatists don't buy the same thing necessarily with the same functionality as the first two groups, okay? You have to talk to them differently. You gotta sell them differently. You may have to modify your product to make it to that marketplace. That chasm, or Death Valley as I call it, is really expensive and can be a very long process, okay? And so as you think about your idea and your product, and if you're going to build a company out of it, keep this in mind, that it's easy to go out and sometimes get fooled by early adopters and say, oh, this is really cool, this is great. And, we're going through this thing with Tilt Break right now, and we've talked to half a dozen people, and everybody said, that's really cool, Tom. That's a great idea, Gino. I want to buy a bunch of this, right? Well, we don't know yet if the people we're talking to are innovators, early adopters, or they represent the majority. We have not had enough conversations yet to know that, okay? And as we go through our journey with that product, we'll start to figure that out. But that chasm, or that Death Valley, is really important to understand it's there, especially from a financing perspective, because that's where it gets expensive.
Yeah, you burn a lot of cash.
Correct. So I want to share that with you for those of you not familiar with that concept. The next thing I want to talk about is what I call the 4 W's of sales and marketing. It's nothing that I've generated myself. It's pretty standard knowledge in the business. But again, as inventors and guys with product ideas, it's important to think about these things as you think about what to do with your product, right? So the first thing is the who, right? Who writes the check for this thing or this service or this technology? Who uses the product? And if you're selling to businesses, if you're in a B2B business, right?
Those are likely 2 different people.
All 3 of these people are different people, right? And lastly, who says no? And that's the person that most salespeople miss, right? Because we get happier. We call it happy years in the business, right? We hear what we want to hear. We get excited when people like us. But usually there's somebody in the organization, again, if you're in a B2B situation, that can say no, and they'll kill your deal. And so you got to think through, if you, again, just in a B2B sale versus a B2C sale, think these things through, right? Who can say no, who can say yes, and who uses the product and versus who writes the check, which are, as Gino said, different people. What? Okay, back to that problem. What are we solving? Is this just kind of a cute little thing to have that we think is nice, or does it really solve a problem? In our business with the tilt brake, right, we know that there is a health and safety issue, and more importantly, an economic issue related to workman's comp. We talked to one individual who manages a fleet of 400 trucks, and he says if we can
document one injury a year by the use of our trucks, it would be worth it to buy them.
Yep, they'll re-outfit their whole fleet of 400 trucks if they think it will prevent 1 injury a year, because that's how much it costs in workman's comp to that company. So understand the problem, understand the value prop, which is what we just talked about, right? It's usually save time or save money, right? So what is it we're solving, and what are the economic impacts of that, or the value prop? Next is why. And as I always like to ask people, my product better be better, faster, or cheaper than what's already on the market. And usually I tell people, I say, you better have at least 2 out of 3, if not all 3. You'd love to have all 3. It's really hard to do all 3. But if you can get 2 out of 3, you got a shot. If you only got 1 of those 3, then you may not have a sellable product in the marketplace. So ask yourself that question. Is my product better, faster, cheaper than what's already on the market? In a lot of cases, there's nothing like this on the market. And so your why has to be looked at through a different lens than a situation where there's already a solution or a product on the marketplace. Then lastly is the win, right? Again, these are mainly in B2B sales, right? But what is the process by which they make decisions, right? For those of you that have not had a sales background and you're an inventor and you have great ideas and you're scientists and engineers, once you try to bring products into businesses, there's a lot of issues that you got to uncover to understand how they do things and what is their decision cycle. Do they require trials of 30 days or 60 days before they'll use your product? Right. Purchase orders, delivery time frames, there's all sorts of issues.
Payment cycles.
Yep. And so when do they make a decision? When do they issue a purchase order? And then when do you get paid cash, which may all be months and months and months and months apart from each other.
Yep.
Just because somebody says I'm going to buy it doesn't mean you're going to get cash in your bank next week, right? And if you start a business, I can tell you from experience, the number one thing you got to worry about is cash flow, right? And understanding how and when your customers and their decision-making process and their payment cycles has a huge impact on your cash flow. And that will, again, be
I think it's, Tom, it's one of those things in the Shark Tank that when they say, what kind of sales have you had of this product already? What revenues are you already producing?
Right.
And when someone on that TV show says, well, I am really not doing anything, or maybe I've got this little bit, they pretty much get thrown out.
Away. Yep.
They walk because I mean, you need that organic base to start out and start moving some stuff.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. I just got a few slides left here. So I want to also walk you through something. I'm going to give credit here to the Exponential Group. It's a local company here in Minneapolis. I've gotten to know. They do sales consulting for startups. So if you want to hire some sales consulting guys that are really good, the Exponential Group is a great place to look at. And they've created this thing called the sales learning curve and process for startup companies. Okay. And if you look at the bottom here, right, it talks about learning, testing, You see that word test, test, test again down there, where you get to performance. And what they've done is they've kind of broken up selling into sort of 4 phases, right? And the first phase is in this development side, and then we got the systematic side. The first phase is, can the founder sell this, right? It's usually the easiest thing to answer, right? In our case, the tilt brake, as soon as we get a working prototype, as the founder, we're going to go out and try to sell this ourselves, right?
And it's almost necessary. I mean, the founder needs to be the one who gets it going.
Absolutely. And the second question is can a non-founder sell this, right? Then if he can sell it or she can sell it, can we get a mini sales team to sell it, right? A small group of people. Now we're getting towards, hey, we're getting out of our development phase into a systematic phase. And then the bigger question is, and now how can we scale sales, whether it's through a distribution channel, an online strategy, a direct B2B sales force, an independent rep network, right? There's dozens of different ways to do this. But then once we get to that, where we're going to become a scalable company and really start to generate positive profits and growth, is can we create a scalable sales model that can support the necessary revenue to actually create a successful and profitable business. Okay. I'm watching my clock here, 7:05. So last thing I want to talk about is funding options. Okay. These may not be new to you, but I just wanted to cover them, and we can talk more if you'd like to. But obviously there's some simple ones like your own cash, right? And bank leverage. A gentleman called me this morning, and he's got 6 patents, but he really needs to take care of some bank issues he's got on a personal level, and we certainly want to help him do that. There's of course friends and family, which we've all gone down that road before. You've got targeted customers or potential partners, and this is the one I want to just spend a moment on because I don't hear it talked about enough. When I talk to young companies and entrepreneurs, they go down the road of getting a bank loan, going to an angel, whatever it might be, friends and family. But if in your world you've got targeted customers or a licensed partner or a potential channel partner, those are the best possible investment options you could ever have in your life.
No doubt about it.
Right?
Because they usually know the market and the product, generally how it might be applied in the marketplace, but they also have their own inertia. And if you can get into their inertia, if you can attach yourself to them and begin to gain momentum through their momentum, it's worth giving away something.
Yeah. For it. Yeah, we call these strategic investors versus financial investors, and they're always the most I should have stack ranked these in retrospect on the best to worst, but that would be the best if you can. It's not easy to do. This is not an easy piece of advice I'm giving here. I recognize that, but it's hugely valuable if you can pull it off. Yeah. Right? You've got National Science Foundation grants, which one of our younger inventors just got one last week for $28,000, which is awesome news. He just sent us an email this afternoon, which is really, really cool. A young 22-year-old still in college.
Yep. Graduating this spring and hopes to take the business to be a lifelong
business.
He wants to make a lifelong business for himself, and he's got a real shot at it. We believe.
Yeah, and he's got a great, super smart, very energetic. In fact, he got a $28,000 grant when he's still in college. It's an amazing accomplishment.
Yeah, amazing.
And we hope to be part of his journey. You've got SIBR grants as well that some of you guys have applied for as well. You've got angels and angel networks. You've got early stage VCs, which, if there's any VCs on this call, I apologize in advance. But those are usually the last place you want to go because they will usually ask for the most. And again, nothing disparaging about anybody on this call. But unless you really got a great model and you're really confident it's going to scale like crazy.
They provide scalability.
Yeah, they do, but they also ask for a lot.
Yep.
You're going to give up a lot, right? And then of course you can use Minnetonka Labs with a very innovative, creative way to finance your early stage investments. So 3 words of caution. This will be my last slide, and then we'll open up for Q&A. This will take longer than you think.
For sure.
And if you think it's going to take 6 months, double it, and then double it again. Right? Gino, tell you the My Pillow guy took how long to get his
2
pillow?
years to get the pillow going. So
Took 2 years to build a pillow.
and then he said he sold them at trade shows and state fairs all over the country. He's selling them one pillow at a time.
Right.
That's how he got started.
But,
And then to date, I think he sold, I think I did the math, somewhere around $1.5 billion worth of
with the
product.
pillows.
Yeah.
So it took him 2 years to make a pillow.
And 7 years to get it going.
Yeah. And it was probably much longer than he thought he was going
Oh,
to be, right? So whatever you think it's going to take, it's going to be some factor of 2 or 3 or 4 times that. It's also going to be more expensive than you think. Okay. Every venture I've been in, we have vastly underestimated the expense and the timing. It's no matter what we try to be conservative. It's amazing how things you don't think of once you get into this thing. And it's happening right now with us with this, our tilt break, right? We won't even go there right now, but it's much more expensive than we thought this was going to happen in October. And as we got into it and Gino started moving with different types of metals and aluminums, it got much more expensive than we thought, given what we learned during the prototyping process.
Yep. Yeah, it's one thing to stick a bunch of stuff together with a welder and kind of make it work. It's a whole nother thing to make something that's ready for the marketplace.
Right. Absolutely. And the third piece I'm going to say is that you're going to uncover issues and opportunities you've never dreamed of. Okay. Yep. They're both good and bad. But once you go down this road and you get in the marketplace, things will happen that you can't imagine. Okay. So the last piece of advice is be flexible, right? Be flexible and let go of your ego, right? If you think, hey, I got this idea and it's going to work like this and the market's going to love it, and the market says, nah, you got to shift it over this way about 30 degrees, drop the ego and say, okay, market, you're right, I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Okay? Because the market is always right. Remember
They're
that.
the ones with the money.
The guy with the money is always right when in this business, right? Don't fight and don't have the urge to say, no, you're wrong, because I know this is my idea and it's got to work this way. The market says something different. Let go of your ego and move with it. All right. So with that, that's the end of our presentation. I kept that to looks like about 40 minutes or so, 45, which I think was my budget. So hopefully I did a good job with that, gentlemen, and we'll open up for questions.